playing for the American League Championship. I don't believe it. It just continues.
High fly ball into right field. She is gone.
Oh, drives one. Right field. Did he do it? He did. Are you kidding me? Let's go!
Yes, it is that time again. It is the weekly FSS Plus podcast. But today I'm flying solo, at least flying without Jason Churchill. I've got a special guest, the very one and only. He was on the show last week, a guy you're going to be hearing a lot more of going forward, Mr. Jeremy Booth, wearer of the crown, Future Stars Series God. Is that enough egging you on?
I'm just watching this friendly taping on StreamYard. That's it. I'm
as uncomfortable as you floating that ego, dude. But I gotta ask. So between you and me, you and me, so Jason isn't here because he's sick. As the man that, for lack of a better word, employs Jason Churchill, what do you think of this PTO?
Well, for the record, he's not the only one that I employ. Okay, so let's
I clocked in.
Okay, let's get that one out there. I think I don't know. I mean, Church was on the conference call today. He didn't say anything. For all I know, he's on a beach somewhere. I don't know. Maybe he's chilling out. Maybe he's playing guitar by the fire. I have no idea what he's doing. But I know this. He's probably going to listen to this. He's going to edit it. He's going to talk to you about it. You guys will go back and forth. And then, we'll see the finished product come out. So, look, you and me got the floor. It's not our first day together. We've done this a couple times now. So, he can rest. You and me got it. You can hold it down. You better be careful, though. Wally Pip's a real thing,
Oh, yes, it is. Yeah,
So.
The best ability in this industry is availability, baby, and he ain't here.
That's right.
Jeremy Booth. So if I gave you Vegas odds, Jason Churchill on a beach at -300 or Jason Churchill actively playing the guitar by the fire, -300.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump into this, man. This is a baseball podcast. I'm going to get your first macro 10,000 foot view opinion of the offseason so far. Shohei Ohtani, Yamamoto going to the Dodgers as well. A bunch of moving pieces, but kind of where do you think Major League Baseball is as we turn the calendar to 2024?
First of all, the Dodgers and Shohei Ohtani did an excellent thing. And I know that it's been maligned by fans across the industry. And I mean, I got to tell you, man, that's pretty smart. That there's a rule in the CBA, a clause in the CBA that allows that to happen. And good for them. Now, I'm a little surprised based on history, right, with Alex Rodriguez and some of the deferrals he tried to do back in the day, that went through on the PA side. But I also understand it. You know what I mean? I mean, they're looking at a guy that's paid more than Messi at this point. You know what I mean? So it's like it's not something that people got creative and they got it done. And Ohtani and the Dodgers did a pretty good thing. Now look, it sounds like Yamamoto would have signed with them anyway, regardless of Ohtani. Want to be in LA, which tells you that maybe LA's got something going. I'm curious, and it's something that you have to ask: if that amount of money is lying around LA, who else got what? You know what I mean? Like, what's going on? Because it's not just the Yankees and the Red Sox. And John Heyman, I don't mind saying this, said something. Well, it's great for baseball, the Dodgers and the Yankees. It's not great for baseball that just two teams are able to get involved in this at all. It's actually terrible for baseball. And John has a lot of what I would call really bad takes in some stuff when it comes to his perspective on the league, the homerisms with I'm flat out saying it. I don't care, when it comes to this stuff. Now, it's not like he's, listen to him. He doesn't have information. He does. He's got it. He got some hooks. He knows what he's talking about when it comes to where he's getting it from. But it's horrible for baseball that it was just two teams.
Horrible.
You got to ask.
I tweeted. I was going to say I tweeted something like that the night that Yamamoto signed, and so many people took it as, how's this bad for baseball? It's just one team capitalizing on players wanting to play for him. And I said, you are making my argument for me. The fact of the matter is the Dodgers are doing it the right way. The Dodgers are doing it the way you are supposed to do it to win championships. My issue is there are 29 other teams that don't seem as enthusiastic about putting a winner on the field and would rather collect equity in real estate. That's my issue. Are there teams trying? Hold on really quick. A couple other people said, well, other teams are trying. It's just the Dodgers. The players want to play for the Dodgers. I'm telling you, if teams' number one goal was to win as a majority, there would be enough money moving around to where the Dodgers would get outbid on some of these guys. That's not happening.
I look at San Francisco, and they tried. It's almost like that SpongeBob gif, like, oh, you tried. I'm gonna head out. Like I wish I totally get it with the Giants. They actually are making the effort. Doesn't seem like too many people want to go there. And I think that, Buster Posey had some comments, whether you agree with them or disagree with them, people don't want to play there right now because they're not landing anybody. I think the Phillies, who are another big market team that have been included in this, have a lot of money out. They just do. They got, Trey Turner, and they've got Harper, and they've got, Nola. They got some dollars that are out there right now. And, going to get a guy like Yamamoto or even Ohtani doesn't fit for them. You look at the Astros, and, the Astros are I think we're the fourth biggest market, third biggest city in the country. Jim Crane's just been adamant. He doesn't want to go over the CBT. Don't want to do it. Mm-hmm. So he's not going to do it. It's just that. Now you look in Seattle, which was once a destination for, Ichiro and Kenji Jojima and Sasaki and like the Asian player pipeline, right? And to get over there, even the outfielder, Korean outfielder, was there. We had at one point. Which Chu, right? We had Chu at one point.
Shinsu.
So like you look,
Shinsu Chu.
So you look at all the guys that came through Seattle from Asia, and the Mariners were quiet. I don't know if it's 54% is the goal or what, but like there was no opportunity to go play in Seattle. And from having been in Seattle, and certainly the reception, when we were there in the draft that I got when I went back there. That city deserves a winner in the worst way. Like it just does. You got to get some of these guys in there. And, I've been part of that situation before, Joe, where ownership has said, yeah, you spent all this money, but now we're not going to finish the job. I don't know if that happened. I'm just telling you, looking from the outside in, having been on the inside looking out, that happened before, and the next year they gave the money and it didn't come back around. So anyway, point is, the rest of baseball, somebody else should have been in on this. The Angels certainly should have been in on this with Ohtani. It's the same city. The Padres, they weren't going to get to spend any more money. AJ spent a lot of money in 9 years. That wasn't happening it just wasn't happening. So that was, so you start kind of peeling it away. Texas, not so much a fit. Cubs, maybe. $700 million is a lot of money. It really is a lot of money for anybody. It's a lot of money no matter who you are. So I think you start finding that other clubs maybe had budgets that were different and needed more pieces than just the one. I think the Dodgers probably felt they cleared a bunch of payroll, at least in theory, and they had one or two pieces away from being able to win this thing for a while. And so they spent the money on Ohtani to keep him in LA. He obviously didn't want to leave, gave him a great deal to go out and go ahead and get somebody else who was coming anyway. And it just kind of worked out that way. I still would have liked to see, and I mean this, I would have liked to see the Seattle Mariners be more competitive here. And I'm not just saying that because it's Seattle and because, of our ties to the city. I really would have liked to see them be more competitive. I think it's amazing to me neither one of these guys entertained it. It just says a lot about the state of that ownership group.
Well, I mean, think about it. I'm talking more from a 10,000 foot view. The fact that Major League Baseball has just as many teams over 215 million in payroll as they do teams under 140 million in payroll is a problem. And I think Seattle is probably they're probably a perfect microcosm as a team that, currently sits at 125 million in payroll. And to even reach what the Astros are doing, they got $100 million a year in runway. I mean, you want to talk about a team that in the current landscape compared to the other organizations has the room to fit an Ohtani, to fit a Lee, to fit a Yamamoto. They're a perfect example. But Jeremy Booth, this is not a podcast about Shohei Ohtani. We've done that. We've got 4 topics today. We're going to talk about some rule changes in Major League Baseball. More rule changes coming down the pipe. And if there's one thing I know about you, you may have an opinion or two on rule changes. Also, you mentioned the Cubs. You mentioned the Cubs. We're going to dive into the Cody Bellinger sweepstakes. I want to get your take on Cody Bellinger, where you think his appropriate value is, where you think he should end up. We will end this show with some talk of the Houston Astros and what direction they are going, because they seem to be in a transition period and they need to pull some levers as well. And we're going to wrap this thing up with the 2024 draft and talk about 3 or 4 former Future Stars alumni that are going to be highlighted highly in this upcoming class. Jeremy Booth, if there is a runner on base in 2024, you no longer have 20 seconds to throw the baseball on the mound. You now have 18 seconds. They're tightening the rope even that much more for pitchers in Major League Baseball. And I got to ask, while injuries were maybe up marginally last year, I think most would agree the quality of the viewing experience for the fan drastically improved. Where are you at with shortening the pitch clock even further?
So I agree that although a pitch clock is not how I would have drawn it up originally, I agree that a pitch clock was clearly needed because the way the game was played, which is it's an action rule. So all these are all action rules, right? To get the game back moving and things that it did before the era of the 3 true outcomes. That's what this is about, right? And so when you get this type of action going, I think that both, and I'm going to speak from the middle point of view when I talk about this, both the players and both Major League Baseball would have agreed that the action had to come back in the game. I think they both agreed on that, right? I think the fans said, we're not going to watch this thing anymore for 4-hour games, and that includes me. It was very hard to watch Big League Baseball with guys fouling balls off all the time, walking everybody, striking out everybody. It was boring. It really was.
Yeah,
you go back,
it was brutal.
You go back to Bull Durham, and he says, stop trying to strike everybody out, throw ground balls. Strikeouts are fascist, right? So it was ridiculous. So that's a good thing. Now, I would have preferred, if it was me, just on the health and safety side, because of how they were playing for so long, that they had 25 seconds instead of 20. That's just me. Last year. Now, everybody adjusted to 20. In the minor leagues, apparently they tested something like 16 and a half, 17 seconds, so it was still pretty quick. So the 18 gives them another second. Minor league players are coming out of college most times now, right? They're used to these pitch clocks as far as these. So the pitch clock to them isn't foreign. Even if they come out of high school, it's not foreign to them. So because they play on time limit games most of the time. So it's not foreign for them to get on the mound and get back and go. Now, with that, I would have preferred another year of staying at 20 to test it. That's just me. I also understand they had the data to back it up to go to 17 or 18. Okay. Unfortunately for the players, they lack the seats to stop any of that, right? For their point of view. So they're able to push it through. Initially, Joe, I got to confess, I thought it was up from 15 to 18. I didn't think it was down from 20 to 18. Just in my head, it was like 15 to 18.
Yeah.
I thought it was a good thing. I was like, man, they give them more time. But I understand why they did it. They're trying to keep fan experience, keep action in the game, keep it moving. And I don't know that I would have done it yet from the health and safety side, but I understand why it happened. I also understand why the Player Association said, wait a minute, it's not need some more time to digest this. We don't want to see more guys get hurt.
Yeah. To your credit, Major League Baseball did come out and say, well, we moved it from 20 to 18. You mentioned the 5 seconds because most pitchers were throwing the ball with 3 seconds or 5 seconds left in the pitch clock. So they took away 2 more seconds. They still believe there's that 3-second buffer, for big moments. I don't think it's going to change the game at all, to be honest with you. I think it's going to be, another reason for players to complain, and for good reason. They have very little leverage or negotiability in a lot of these types of circumstances, but I don't think it's going to change the game that much. The other one that I wanted to bring up with you, I don't think moving the mound visits down from 5 to 4 matters at all. I actually have not seen yet an instance where mound visits have come into play at any point in the game. There's also another rule where if a pitcher warms up before an inning, he must face at least one hitter. that might be a small adjustment, but I really don't think that's going to impact the game too much. It's just going to probably change the way guys prepare for some of those late inning roles. The one that I wanted to ask you about, however, was the runner's lane to first base has been widened into the infield grass. So all of a sudden, my first inclination when hearing about this and reading this was this maybe brings the bunt into play a little more. I mean, if you're a good bunter and you can put one down the first base line, and you force the catcher to make a play and go wide on the ball, that kind of brings something into play. What do you think?
So I actually want to talk about the one before this, and I'll come back to this. Just real quick. The reason why they're doing the guys pitching before the inning, warming up before the inning, have to face one hitter is health and safety. It's to stop. Right. It's to stop the guys up, down, up, down, up. It happens all the time. Guy gets hot, sits back down. Guy gets hot, sits back down. The effects that have on their body, even their mental state, which people don't talk about enough, but their physical state, especially relievers, right? That's a problem. So I totally get that. That's actually a good rule. I think the players would like that because if a guy gets hot, he's got to come in and pitch. Has to. You know what I mean? The baseline rule for me, I'm just going to cover it up this way. It's overdue. It was one of the most ridiculous parts of our game when we look at how the baselines play out, that the line is right in the middle. And then, you have all this room on this side for the runner's lane and nothing on this side because using the play you described, sometimes guys get on that grass, man. They got to correct, right? If catcher comes out, it maybe change how you play first base a little bit. But if you're playing first base correctly for that type of ball, your feet are in a position where you can switch and move around it anyway. So it doesn't – I think it puts more action back in the game, but I think it actually gives a little more sanity is the word I would use to the baseline. I just never understood that one. If you do this in between first and second and third and the plate, you got 3 feet. 3 feet, 3 feet. Usually the rule. But on this going down to first base, you got 5 inches. I don't whatever that is, I'm making up a number. I don't know what that was. So I think it's a good rule. I think it's overdue, and it corrects some sanity back into what that baseline looks like.
Like people that are skeptics or will give the other opinion would say, instead of widening it into the field of play for the catcher and the pitcher to have to avoid the runner, why not just take a second bag, kind of do the men's beer league thing? You got the first base bag, and then you got a bag to the right for the runner to run through. It takes the runner entirely out of the field of play. I'm assuming, as a traditionalist like me, that is something that you don't want any part of.
I'm just going to say it's still professional baseball. It's not Sunday night softball. Okay?
That's right.
So because of that, we're still going to go ahead and be professionals and realize that these are some of the most gifted human beings on the planet, and they can figure that out. Okay? Because that's what you're there to see. You're not coming – you don't see 40,000 people watching guys on Wednesday night, do keg stands at second base. It's not what's going on here. We're trying to move this thing along, and you got – you're showing up every night to watch guys be, human highlight reels. Let them be that way. That's what they're there for.
Yep. Adding a second base probably does inherently take a little bit of athleticism out of the game. You got to play the game on a razor's edge, man. Like that's kind of what it's all about. They move fast. They're twitchy guys. Let them play.
It's an amazingly quick game. Amazingly quick.
It is.
I think that's a good rule too. I actually didn't have a whole lot of the one I would have been cautious on just on time wise. I thought it would, again. You hit the 15. Maybe that's why I had 15 in my head. I thought it went 15 to 18. Not 20 down to 18. But if the pitchers are still throwing at 15 seconds, then so be it. I would have liked a little more time to study it, but I get it. The rest of them I think are great. I'm fine with that.
Is there a rule in baseball that you hate? Like the drop third strike kind of thing? Like, is there a rule that you just hate or needs to be added?
I don't really look at stuff like that, Joe. I'm more of like, this is the way it is. We got to work within it. Let's find a way to get it done. You know what I mean? So I think that as long as the game has rhythm to it and pace, I'm more of the things that I dislike about it, if there are things that way, which I don't like to think like that. Things I dislike about it would be the things that we need these action rules in the first place. Because we played this game for so long without having to need them, right? And then we gave some people, it doesn't matter who, the ability to sculpt the game in a way where Major League Baseball, to their credit, they finally listened to the fans and the players and said, this is ridiculous. And they adjusted back, and they needed rules to do it. That to me is disappointing. I think it's a credit on both sides. Again, players and MLB, but it's disappointing it had to get there. I'm glad it's here now. These rules are obviously not going to go anywhere, and hopefully the action comes back in and we start seeing more of the game that I think the fans, and in fans I mean players too, because players got to be fans. You got to be a fan of this thing. The fans want to see. It becomes a little more, look, there's other changes out there that'll help this thing along or move it forward or back. There's other things that are coming that, both sides have in play that'll get stuff done on both sides. Like they, and that's good because they both are trying to improve the health of the game, which they weren't trying to be more concerned about that.
I got one, and it's really nitpicky, and it's probably very new age, but I would like to see Major League Baseball give players a little bit more agency with their personality, their creativity. I mean, we're just finally getting to the point where bat flips seem to be acceptable, or like people are enthusiastic about it as a majority. I'd like to see, I don't know if you saw in the Home Run Derby this year, where players were able to take a custom bat, a painted bat, whatever you want on your bat, a brand, a nickname, it doesn't matter, a hometown. I think if you give the players the ability to bring whatever color bat they want with whatever they have on it, so long as the content is regulated by Major League Baseball, I think that would be a tremendous way to bring personality into the game. It's not part of the uniform.
Some of that stuff is done because the game's going so much more international. They have that type of flair in Latin America and the Caribbean. They have some of that in Asia, even though it's still structured. I mean, you go to these games and you've got drums being played, you got horns, you got all kinds of stuff you don't see over here. You know what I mean? So in Latin America, some of the celebrations that they have that people are shocked by here, that's Tuesday. You know what I mean? It's just what they do. So it's not the game is just getting, it's getting more international. And so with that comes more international things to enlighten other markets or to attract people. Like, what's that clip that Ichiro had the other day or a few weeks ago? We all saw it. He's 50 years old and he hits a ball through whatever it was, the window. And he's like
430 feet.
Yeah, he's got that exaggerated face, that cartoon big smile, like he's got that, like, ooh, wow, you know what I mean? But that's the flair that comes from being an international player. American people wouldn't do that. They'd be like, oh man, I broke a window. Oops. Ichiro's playing it up a little bit, and the fans are eating up. Yeah,
so with the bats specifically, like if you were looking for another revenue stream for marketers, for the league, for team, and like whatever, like if you started throwing alternative colors, alternative logos, like the Space Needle, the Sears Tower, I don't give a damn. Like you could do a whole Minute Maid orange thing on some Astros bats. Like that's a cash cow, and it's not part of the uniform. I just think it's low hanging fruit, man.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think that's a good point. I mean, stuff like that is obviously for the fan that you want to get into the game. You want to get the younger kids in the game as much as possible. You want to get those fans watching it, loving baseball. Unfortunately, they're not going to love something that doesn't have action. I mean, those guys have, and also flair and marketing stuff like you're talking about. I mean, kids that are playing video games got 3-minute attention spans. That's it.
Yeah.
So, so you want to turn a 4-hour baseball game? Yeah, sure. You know what I mean? So it's something where you start seeing these type of things, you get some interest, they start falling in love with it. It's part of the concept behind play ball. Just go throw the balls and bats out there and run around and enjoy baseball for a minute. We'll teach you how to play later. So, I'm not trying to pat these guys on the back, but the intent is there, is what I'm saying. And when you start doing things like that, it allows that type of flair in that marketing, like you're saying, or puts action in the game. It means it's finally headed back the other way. I do think, and this is a topic for not tonight, but another conversation, that if this is what you're going to do, you got to put more of a focus on development. You have to put more of a focus on skill development because you have to across the industry, because you have to play the game with action, right? If you don't learn how to play the game with action, then how are you going to be able to execute it for the fans to want to see? You got to develop players to be able to do that. And before that, you got to have guys that can really evaluate it. And that's industry wide as well. It doesn't matter. It's not an indictment of any one group or any one person. It's just a theory and a thought process that this has to be kept up with. I think there's things continuing to come there that should tighten up that process as well on the evaluation and development side. And that's good too.
Yeah. Yeah. Neon armbands, Grinch cleats, crazy batting gloves with, the logo if you stick the gloves together. we're on the precipice of some pretty cool personality movements in Major League Baseball. And to your credit, you can't have a bat flip if you're not capable of hitting Major League pitching. So
Yeah. So hang on.
nobody's gonna cheer about your 12th homer of the year when you're batting 141. It doesn't work that way.
I think the bat flip thing, I've been waiting to say this for a long time. I'm glad you brought that back up. The bat flip thing, guys, people have been pimping home runs since the 70s. Like, this isn't brand new. You know what I mean? It's been happening
They
since
just
the
used
60s.
to get thrown at.
Yeah, and they used to wear it a little bit, but there was more of a respect level for the guys that did it. Like, certain guys didn't do it and certain guys did. Reggie Jackson did it. Griffey did it. Bonds did it. I mean, Ricky, who I've known my entire life, which is not a joke. I'll tell you that another time. My entire life, the amount of popping collars and side steps and shuffles. And I mean, it's amazing. So you watch all these things happen. Canseco. I mean, come on. Like, these guys have been doing it for a long time. It's not new. Buhner. How about Buhner? Buhner used to do it too. He flipped the bat with the wrist. It was great. Some of that stuff was always been entertaining. These kids today, to use the old guy talk, because that's who's yelling about it, right? These kids today, the players today, man, they just got their own way of doing it. Now, they might do it in ways that are a little bit like, I just sit back and smile like, come on, dude. Like, really? Really? But you know what? That's their way of doing it. And if their generation isn't going to regulate it like that, it's their game now. It just is. They're the ones playing.
Yeah.
And if they go ahead and do it, you got to let them do it. Like, if a pitcher doesn't want to throw at them, Juan Berenguer, who nobody here is going to remember except for you, but nobody who's listening to this is going to remember Juan Berenguer, I don't think, used to throw punches in the air after he struck you out. Like, like, come on. It's just been around for a while.
Yeah.
Used to stare at people. Randy Johnson used to laugh at you, basically, with that stare. Just like, who do you think you are? Everybody had something.
Everybody did it.
Yeah, that big right. I mean, everybody had something. I mean, it's like we were to act as if the game isn't. And look who we're talking about: Eric Davis and Straw, and all the guys that played the game that had that type of flair. Those are the ones that are coming to mind. Bo Jackson, flair. Frank Thomas had a little bit of flash too. His flash was how easy he did it and the class he played the game with, and we all remember it because of that, right? So when we're thinking about these guys that did it. The guys that we're talking about all achieved a certain level of success, and we remember and smile about them because of the entertainment value of what they did. And bat flips are just part of the entertainment value. The difference in what we've got today versus before is that everybody's doing a bat flip, so it's lost its appeal. If Griffey hit something, he had that little strut and slammed the bat, hit the ground. The thing went 9 miles. It's Griffey, man. Do what you want, right? Let Joey Cora try that. Wasn't going to work out.
Joey Cora never hit a homer in his life.
Right. If a guy decides to go ahead and hit a bomb, and squares one up, and he's strutting and pimping and tossing, and he's hit like 6 for his career, like, knock it off. Like, no one wants to see that. You know what I mean? So I think there's a different level of who can do it. But, as annoying and frustrating and over the top as it may be to some people, it's their game. It was played a certain way before, and it's played a certain way now. And I think that's just where we're at.
It comes down to one thing, man. Either you are specifically taunting the pitcher that you just hit a nuke off of, or it doesn't matter. That's what it comes down to. If you are taunting the other player and disrespecting the other player who's trying just as hard to get you out as you are trying to hit a bomb, then it doesn't matter. But we got to move on. We are half hour into this thing, and we're talking about bat flips. I want to talk briefly on Cody Bellinger because I think he's a really polarizing player this winter. 6 weeks ago, it was who's going to give this guy 8 years, $225 million, 10 years, $250 million. And now it seems like the market has come back to, you kind of look at the metrics, you look at the inconsistencies in his pro career. Now it kind of seems like he's maybe in that 6 and 150 range. Could go either way. But what team do you think best fits Cody Bellinger? And if you were Cody, where would you sign?
I'm a big believer in playing places that you're comfortable. And I think if you're going to produce and you're going to, if Cody Bellinger goes to a place, we'll use Philly, and let's say Philly isn't a place he wants to be, but he goes there for the money. It's never going to happen. We saw a lot of guys end up with the Yankees over time. Heck, we just saw the Mets, right? Last year, 400 something million, and guys are like, I'm out. Let me get out of here. You know what I mean? So you have to have the right place to play. If I'm Cody Bellinger, I'm going back to the Cubs. I'm going right back to Chicago.
Makes sense.
Because whatever I had in Chicago worked for me. And as long as I'm staying away from the things that didn't work for me, a la private hitting coaches who take credit, okay, then I'm going to go ahead and do what my process is, and I'm going to continue to be a good big leaguer. And the Cubs are not that far away from winning anyway, right? That's not a team that isn't going to win. I'm probably staying out of the American League. I'm staying in the National League because I know that league pretty well. I may consider going to Arizona if they had a need. They probably don't. I may consider going there because I'm from there. The Dodgers aren't a fit anymore. The Angels might be a fit, but then you're playing, just across town from where you were before. So if I'm Cody Bellinger, I'm probably going back to Chicago. I just am. I'm not an East Coast guy. I'm a West Coast guy. My mentality isn't really made for the East Coast. If you look at all those guys on the East Coast, Harper was maybe an exception of those guys that thrive there. Noah's a Southeast guy. And I'm thinking, of course, these markets of Philly up. Because if you ever listen to this, whoever's listening to this, if you've never been in the stadiums from Philadelphia through Boston and both New Yorks, you haven't lived yet. Those places are absolutely ridiculous when it comes to how those fans are. I mean, I've been in all of them for one reason or another, whether it's been the playoffs or the postseason or the World Series, or it's been insanity in every single one of them. The Mets are probably the nicest of all of them. The Phillies fans, oh my goodness, But when it comes to, if you're Bellinger, you stay somewhere you're comfortable. And the Cubs have a chance to win National League, had a good year. Whatever's working is going to work. Go right back to Chicago.
Yeah, especially, if the Cubs will match whatever money is going to get thrown your way, it doesn't seem like there's going to be some albatross deal that's thrown out. And, you can hide in Wrigley a little bit. It's the Midwest. It's a little bit quieter. There's not as much media attention. And for a guy that struggled to play baseball in every sense of the word for 3 or 4 years, to kind of refine his career in Wrigley, where he seems to be comfortable, where he seems to like the dimensions, seems to like the batter's eye. He's able to stay healthy. The fans adore him. Yeah. I don't see why he wouldn't just return if there's $150 million, contract on the table waiting for you, 170, whatever it ends up being. They haven't signed anybody. They have the money.
Yeah, that's it's interesting to see who hasn't done what. Toronto started to move a little bit. Seattle hasn't done anything, right? Cubs haven't done anything. White Sox started.
Not a Mitch Garver fan, huh? Wow, Mitch Garver hate on the show.
Mitch Garver, sure. But I'm talking about that's not enough to put him over the top. I'm not.
Of course not.
And I'm gonna throw Jerry a bone here. I'm gonna throw Jerry a bone here. That 54% comment he made, that wasn't his. That's not his words. Okay, people are gonna eat him up for that. That is not his words. He's fallen on the sword for everybody else that he has to fall on the sword for. That is not how Jerry Dipoto thinks. You cannot be a competitor, no matter how much you look at probabilities and numbers and say, I want to win 54% of the time. Not going to happen. So
it's the answer to a trivia question. It's not actually how someone in a front office thinks.
Ever. So when it comes to some of the teams, I see the Astros be active. The Rangers. It's going to be interesting to see what they do. Jordan Montgomery is still out there. Do they bring him back? Is that number too big for them? They have other, Garver obviously is no longer a Ranger. He's in Seattle now. So, and the Angels got some money and they haven't done anything either. Right. So it's kind of been like, we're going to get to the end of the year, I think, which is obviously in a couple of days, and we'll see what happens. It's going to be a mad dash on guys that are out there. Trade season is kind of over. Trade season's kind of over. I mean, if anytime you see guys like Jake Myers being reanointed in center field in Houston, and he's probably a fifth outfielder, it tells you what's really on the market out there. So it's interesting. If I'm Bellinger, I go right back to Chicago. I see what they put around me, because of all the places that he could sign, they've got the best shot to win, except for maybe Texas, right? And Texas doesn't have a need in my mind. They need arms.
Yep. I don't even know if. Yeah, I don't know if you could even make room in Texas for Cody Bellinger. I'm sure you could, but they have a big need on the mound. You mentioned Houston a couple of times, and that's somewhere that I want to go with this episode because you're based in Houston, you cover the Astros. They haven't done anything this winter. It's been a quiet winter. They still need help on the mound. They still need one bat. I would probably argue that they needed at least one bullpen arm. What's going on in Houston? And I don't know if you listened to last week's show. We mentioned, Jason and I talked about the idea of trading for Framber Valdez and kind of stretching this window open a little bit longer. If you're in charge over there, what do you do?
Well, Joe, as you did the first part of last week's show. I did the second one. So I heard it. I did listen. What I can say is this. It's hard for me to look at the guys in the chair that I know and criticize what they're doing, only because I know how they're thinking. There's two outcomes to everything, right? And it really depends on what the option is. And almost all of these calls today come from ownership. Almost all of them. So it's like the draft. The GMs go out and see players in the draft now, and it's been going on for about 15 years when they started doing that, maybe 20. Before that 20-year stretch, they didn't do that. They just didn't do it. It was a scouting director, and GMs were focused on the big league club, right? And whoever else was around it, they made the pick. And ownership now gets in the way. I mean, in some ways, they get in the middle of it, and if they want, like in Seattle, another example of what has gone on there. And you're just going to start with Houston. What you need to hear about the Houston Astros is real simple. They don't want to go over the CBT. All right. They don't want to overpay in the reliever market. Okay. They signed Victor Caratini to let Diaz play. Well, they should. That probably is the right move. Maldonado don't need to move on. Okay, that's what that is.
Yeah.
They need another bat, but they need a center fielder. But they want to let Myers now play center field, and he wasn't under your big league roster in the postseason. Help me with that one, right? You turn around and again, nothing against Jake. These are factual moments in time when you look back and you see what they're doing. Now all of a sudden, McCormick's going to play every day. He probably should have played every day last year. A lot of swing and miss, but he probably should have played every day last year. You don't want to re-sign Tucker. You do, in theory, but you've upset him in arbitration for no reason no reason whatsoever. And now you want to go ahead and try to bring him back and get a team-friendly deal or at least a mid-ground? If I'm Kyle Tucker, I'm like, nope, pay me.
No, that guy's going to get 35.
That's
He's
right.
going to get 35 a year.
And he's not going to get that in Houston. At least he should. If history repeats itself, he won't get it in Houston. And you look at guys like Altuve and Bregman, who are up after 24. And instead of signing both, sounds like they'll pick one. Although Dana has publicly said they'll sign both, and they should. What you've got here is a team that happens at the end of a run that's in the mid-ground. And this is going to be very painful for some of the people that aren't in Houston anymore, and some of the people that are still in Houston left behind. They just did not draft well. And so when you don't have a backfill to draft these guys and put them in the big leagues, this is what you end up with. Doesn't matter what you thought at the time. That's your process, and you're entitled to it, and go ahead and good for you. But you did not draft well. So now you have a team, what I call in the awkward phase, right? They're not good enough to surpass Texas as they stand today. Last year, Joe, I will tell you in Houston, I picked the Rangers at the beginning of the year. I said, watch out for Texas. These guys are really good. I'm not saying I thought they were going to win the World Series. They need to get some reinforcements to do that. And Chris Young and company went out and did it. But at the start of the year, they were a threat. Sure enough, they ended up winning the whole thing by doing that. The Astros were really a second-place team. They won the division, by math, but they're really a second-place team, and they got in, and then they played the eventual world champion. Nothing has happened to change that perception. Nothing. If anything, it might be a third-place team right now, right? Because they're probably going to fight Seattle out for some stuff. The Angels aren't going to – right now, I don't know where to fit them yet without Ohtani and with no other moves. And so the Astros got to make a decision. Unfortunately, do Altuve and Bregman and Tucker all go and you just start tearing it down? If you're not going to do that, you need to sink some money into these guys and continue to win while you rebuild the system, because that's why you hired Dana. You hired Dana and now Gavin Dickey is a farm director, and to undo some of the mistakes in the draft, you brought in Derek Ladner, you brought in Dijon Watson, you brought in some more traditional thinking, scouts to do this stuff, right? You brought in a department that has a chance to have some influx into some damage. So with some skins on the wall, all those guys are good. But if you're going to go ahead and give those guys times to win and times to draft players, then you need to give them more of a runway. And if you're not worried about
it's going to take time.
Right, then it's a 10-year deal, and you just start tearing it down now, and you get the money off the books. And I wouldn't be surprised at that point. And I'm not putting this. This is not at all anything I've heard that Jim Crane doesn't sell the team and start over, right? So I think that you're in a position where you got to pick a direction, and the direction that they're picking right now is I don't have a problem with Dana doing this yet. I look out in center field, and I got to spend money somewhere else. I don't want to go to the CBT. All right, I got Myers, McCormick, and Tucker. I got Dubon who can play out there a little bit, and I'm going to go probably bring back Michael Brantley on a very team-friendly deal that's heavy incentive laden because he's still out there too, right? So I'm bringing the same guys back I had before. I got a Bray who is immovable. He ain't going anywhere. I got Tuve who's face of the franchise. He ain't going anywhere. I got Pena who's very controllable, and I think he's that way through 28. He ain't going anywhere. I've got Bregman who's up next year, but he's also a face of the city. He ain't going anywhere. I got a young catcher in Diaz who's going to be hard to replace around the league. He ain't going anywhere, and I gave him a backup.
But you know what? Like a lot of the guys that you've brought up, Altuve, Bregman, you haven't mentioned Verlander. A lot of these guys are set to regress. I mean, Altuve is going to be 34, 35.
Yeah.
Bregman to Bregman's credit, for everything that Bregman is, he's not twitchy. He's not the most explosive guy. He doesn't seem to me like a guy that's going to age terribly well into his 33, 34, 35. Just doesn't have the bat speed to kind of make up for when his body begins to continue to break down. And he's dealt with some bumps and bruises over the last couple of years that have held him out. And Verlander, I will say this. You had mentioned that the Astros haven't drafted well. I thought their 2022 draft was particularly strong. They brought in some good talent there. Gilbert has been a good pro. Jacob Melton's been a good pro. Ryan Clifford. But the issue is they gave all of that up for a 40-year-old Verlander and still elected to pay some of that contract. That was a mistake.
What I'll say about this is because Gilbert's one of our guys, right? And I told Chris Gross, I said, you had a good draft. And I was very, and deservedly so, hard on those guys for a long time. But he had a good draft in 22. I don't know argument, but those guys wouldn't be here in 2024. Not yet. They'd still be in the system. So if we're talking about 24 and 25, we're really talking about guys that were selected somewhere between 17 and 20, somewhere in that range.
And the cupboard's bare. I mean, the cupboard's bare right now. Yeah. So to give credit to Ladnier and these guys that are coming in to really kind of help turn this thing around, you can't expect their contributions until 2020. I mean, realistically, like impact until 2027. You might see a couple of them in 26.
Yeah,
but they won't impact until.
You're not wrong. So then you have to get yourself to that point, and you have to look at your plans around the league. So what I think they're going to end up doing is Alvarez is signed long term. He ain't going anywhere. Okay, he's the next Altuve. They're going to go back with what they got this year. They're going to, the Montero contract, $13 million a year. I think Crane's looking at that going, man, I don't want to do that again, because that was him in Bagwell the whole way, right? You got to Braden for 2 more years. There's nobody in the system that can play that position. You can find
a first baseman on the scrap heap. The issue is the second baseman is going to be 38. The third baseman is going to be 35. Tucker is going to be making 35. Like it gets really complicated really quickly, and there's just not a lot of plan Bs coming up.
There's nothing coming up, so the question is, which way do you go? And if no one's going to work with you on the trade market and you don't have anything to trade in the first place, it becomes free agency. And if you're not going to spend in free agency to replace guys that are getting older, then you're stuck. You're just stuck. Mm-hmm. And the markets are going up and not down. So it wouldn't surprise me that they get 24, maybe 25, or 24 is their best shot. I think Verlander's done after 24, right? Or does he have another 30? He's done. Yeah. So if you got Verlander at 24, who's not the same dude, you've got Bregman who's up, Altuve who's up. You got Tucker, I want to say, is 25. Is that correct? He's 25,
25.
Right?
Yeah.
Yep. So you've got to make a deal with him, or he's probably a trade piece to get a bunch of guys back here to start over.
Framber's 25.
Yeah, Framber's 25. Payne is 28. So they got McCullers is 25, is he not? He's 25 as well.
I
In the
think he
bullpen.
might have just signed an extension, but I mean, even still, the guy hasn't pitched in 2 years. Like, there's just so many question marks. You know what it reminds me of, Jeremy? It's a different tier. It's a different atmosphere entirely in terms of payroll, but it does remind me a lot of 2018 Seattle. You got Konnor, you got Cruz, you got Felix, you got Paxton, Taijuan Walker. Like, all these guys are getting expensive. They're all getting older.
I might be familiar with how that team was put together.
Exactly. You were there. You understand. But they elected to get rid of it all. They got rid of everything in an attempt to be good again in 2022 and beyond. Now, it's worked for Seattle despite not spending any money, but it doesn't work for everyone. There are teams that get stuck in the middle forever and ever. And I do firmly believe that you have to build from within. You can't just go hire a bunch of mercenary free agents and look at the Mets. It just doesn't work by buying rings.
I'll go back to the Seattle club that you mentioned and how that was put together. In 2014, we had just signed Konnor. I think we had him in 13. Is that right? 13. We had Konnor in 14. 14
yeah, it was
first.
14.
Yeah. Anyhow, we had just signed Konnor, and we needed one more bat. We needed a right-handed bat. And Konnor, what people don't know, most people don't know, is that Nelson Cruz and Robinson Cano at the time were best friends. They were tight. And so the question became, can we sign Nelson Cruz, who was coming off a PED suspension at the time? And ownership said no because of the PEDs. That team lost the last day of the season not to get in the playoffs. If you put Nelson Cruz on that 2014 Mariner team, you have a shot at the World Series. He went on to hit 40 in Baltimore. Now, you don't know if he hits 40 in Seattle. Maybe it's 25, maybe it's 30. Point is that that's a big bat we no longer had. And I remember the day that Jack told us, walked us in the office in Peoria in spring training, called me and Tom McNamara and I, because Mac was the director, into the office, said, guess what? Sit down. We said, what happened? He said, we can't get Cruz. It was like, what? You know what I mean? And we went through this why. Look at the Mariners in 2018. Jack's last year was 2015. I want to say he tore that team down in 2016, right? Or 2017, whenever DePoto did.
No, he tore it down. He tore it down post 18.
Post 18. Okay, so he came in, and it was about building the system. And when he realized they couldn't win with that, he tore it down and decided to get better later. Jerry's been there a while now. He's been there 8-9 years, so it runs together.
It's a long time for a GM. Long time for a GM.
But his plan was to build back from within. He hadn't had a whole lot of success with that before. He tried to do it, and ownership told him, I would guess, when you get good enough, because I've heard this before, we'll give you the resources to go get whoever else you need. That's the standard playbook. In Houston, Jim Crane came in when they were not very good, but the cupboard was really full in the system. It was great.
Yeah.
Bobby had the staff did not, but Jim didn't know that. He didn't realize, because he just was walking into the situation. He didn't know. And so he had to get his own GM, which is fine. And he got his own people, and that's part of the game. Those people, though, knew no matter what they said, and obviously we've all read about this in Ben Ryder's book and what other people have said, including myself, as far as what they actually did. They knew what they had. And they came in, did an excellent job at the big league level of trading guys away, bringing people in, augmenting it in free agency, waiver claims. Jeff Luhnow and company did a phenomenal, probably one of the better jobs in recent memory of moving that stuff around. They really did. Did a terrible job with the system, did a great job at the big league level. All right. And so what you have is them riding that out for a decade that all started with what Jim Crane walked in on. Jim has never been through this before. He's never been through what it means to be in the middle, because he's always had flexibility to sign these guys to get ahead. He's always had flexibility to move these guys on. He's got the right front office in there now for where they are. But to do that, they got to go backwards. So in my view, Dana's being told to stand pat because he can't spend money to spend money. He's trying to make the best decisions he can. It isn't a great free agent class anyway. I agree with you. I think they bring some of their old guys back that they had, and they bring them back in, and maybe somebody who's a little bit younger out of the system, like a Belak, or they get him a Colors at the break, who goes into the bullpen. Hunter Brown's going to take a step forward in the rotation as far as his innings and his build and what happens there. And if Framber can return a little bit, you've got Framber, Javier Garcia, Brown, and I'm missing somebody. Framber, Javier, Garcia,
Verlander.
Brown. Well, yeah, but Garcia comes back too about, 3 months in? Urquidy. Yeah. So you've got 4 good ones. Because if Verlander's gone after this year, he's not getting $40 million next year. You got 4 good ones. Your pen needs some work, and then you got to start piecing things together. And how that looks in the free agent market, I don't know. To do that, you probably got to shed some payroll somewhere else. And then that brings back into question loyalty to guys like Altuve and Bregman. So it's an interesting problem. If I'm them, I'm picking a direction, I'm sticking to it. Because the city will support it. So if you got to pay CBT and you got to go over that, and I want to keep winning, I'm doing it. I'm going to buy a window for a couple of years, and then I'm going to tear it down and believe my guys in the system, keep that another couple of years, and I'm going ahead. Or I'm doing it now. I'm not waiting at all, and everybody's gone. This guy's traded, that guy's traded, this guy's traded, and it's all fresh back to the big leagues and see what happens in 4 years. Being in the middle is not a fun place to be, and that's where they are.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, I mean, we'll end on this. I think Houston can stay at the 90 to 93 win mark for the next 3 or 4 years, but Jim Crane is going to have to kind of understand that he's paying a whole lot of money, $225 million a year, for a team that really doesn't have 100 win, 105 win ceiling anymore. I don't personally see that upside anymore, but hey man, playoffs are playoffs. You get in and anything can happen. 54%.
Well, you'd have to pay somebody something big to get another marquee player. And to do that with where they are right now, those guys aren't on free agency that they want to spend on. They're out of their price range. They've decided that price range, but they're out of their price range. That means you have to trade something from the roster to get something back. And the pitching is just good enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think
go ahead.
Maybe Framber, maybe Urquidy, maybe Garcia, maybe Javier. You move one of those guys for, maybe 2 arms that are controllable and a little bit more affordable, and you can groom them up. Maybe that's
let's walk down that for 2 seconds, because you see the whole league, right? We see the whole league. If you trade Javier, what are you getting back on the mound? Because that's what you need. What are you getting back? You gonna get something back better?
No, I don't. I think if you're going to go get impact, if you're going to go get talent that you think is actually going to improve your team in 26, 27, 28,
right,
you got to move for Framber Valdez. I don't think you're going to get guys that move the needle. Urquidy, Garcia, Javier, Brown. I don't think those guys net you something that they couldn't be by themselves.
I agree. And if you move Valdez, is it worth getting back what you're going to move him for if your needs pitching in the first place?
That's the question. Well, I mean, at that point, you're asking if we're going to afford Kyle Tucker and stay under the CBT, do we need to move Framber for 2 guys that are going to make the league minimum for 3 or 4 years that we think could be that we think could be Hunter Browns? That's really the question that you're asking.
You're right. And the problem is because I sit here and I go, man, well, they need this and need this. And I sit back and I go, but if they move this, they get this back. Might as well keep what you got. And if you move this and you get this back, might as well keep what you got. Because if they're a 90-win team, okay, and they, in a we'll call it a mean year, a 90-win club, okay. Yeah. If they turn around and they have a better than average season anywhere, they're a 95-win club. They have a great season, they're a 98-win club, right? Doesn't mean they're going to win 100, 105. You're right. Those days are done. But 95, 98 wins that division now.
Yep.
Because they're going to be
Texas isn't as good as the World Series that they just won. They are very, very, very good, but they're not the regular season juggernaut, and I don't anticipate them to be the regular season juggernaut that they were in October.
Some teams are built.
You can win the West with 96.
Agreed. Some teams are built to win in the regular season, and some teams are built to win in October. October is different baseball. And the one thing I will say, and this is not a shot at the Astros staff because they understand this. The one thing I will say about the Rangers is that Bochy and Ecker and the guys that are on the staff there, Beasley, they understand October is different. I've literally heard this from their mouths. They get that October is not June. It's just not. And you have to play the game differently to win there. And I think for that reason, you're right. They're not built for 162. They'll get there, but they're built for the next 20. And I think that's what they're looking at as far as how they win. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Astros do. I think the Astros have a chance. If I'm picking a winner right now, I'm still picking Texas. If I'm picking a wild card, I'm picking the Astros. I'm not picking the Mariners and Angels to do much as I love Ron Washington, and as bad as I feel for the fans in Seattle without Jerry being given the resources to do what he should be able to do right now. I don't see anything else coming out of the West. So it's my take as it is today. We'll see what happens as it goes forward after the first year.
All right, JB, we're going to end with this. We're coming up on 55 minutes on this thing. Let's get out of here in about an hour 5, give you 10 minutes here. I'm going to give you 4 FSS guys. You have worked with these guys, and I currently have all 4 of them as top, we'll say for the sake of the argument, top 15 picks in the 2024 draft. I'm going to give you all 4 of them. I don't want you to tell me about their game. I've done that stuff. It's already, you can find it on the site. I know how they play. I want you to tell me about the person. I want you to tell the listeners who that person is. If you're a fan of this player, what can you expect out of that kid? And I'm going to start with number 16. I guess it's the top 16. He's number 16 on the FSS board for 2024. Slade Caldwell, outfielder, Jonesboro, Arkansas. You and I spent a lot of time with him at Fenway. Tell me what kind of kid this is.
Man, Slade Caldwell, we'll see him in Texas at Globe Life. In the showdown showcase event with the junior colleges. I can say this: Slade's about 100 makeup on a scale of 2 to 8. Like, I'm not just 20 to 80. He's an 80. He's a 100 on 2 to 8. He is a gamer. He is a winner. He listens. He asks questions. He's humble. He competes. He thinks for himself. He's not afraid of a challenge. He's hunting for a game. He's kind of a Lenny Dykstra guy. He's going to go play for a long time in center field and run balls down. He's very similar to Gilbert, believe it or not. They do things differently.
Yeah.
But he's similar to Gilbert and what Gilbert can bring to the table. Slade Caldwell, whoever gets him is getting a fast mover in my mind. I don't think he hits every level. I think he skips one. Probably double A the big leagues, or he's in AAA for half a minute. Some of the guys that have been rushed to the big leagues, with the way that he processes information, he'll stick where other guys have failed. And so for Slade, family's great, makeup's great, human is great, compete is great. And in scouting, we don't use words like great, but I'm doing it for people that are listening. But if I was going to put this on a report, man, it's 8s across the board on all this stuff. In the old days with reports, you used to give guys, plus or minus for makeup and intangibles, right? And the most was like 3. I mean, he gets all 3. He hits every box of what you want to do. He's a winner. I mean, the game is what it is. He's a winner.
Yeah. He's the guy in this list, and we're actually going to do 3. He's the guy on this list that even though he's 16, like, he's the guy I expect to jump over the guys above him. There's something about this kid that I think ultimately ends up getting him picked way higher than people think.
I can't wait to hear
he's just a high school kid with the ceiling, but the mammoth floor, like for a high school kid.
I want to talk about all 4 because I have a feeling where you're going with this. I'm going to talk about all 4.
Well, I'll go.
Okay.
We'll do 3. We'll do 3. All right. Number 3, we're going to go back to 2022, 2021. One of the first kids I interviewed, Madison, Mississippi, now at Texas A&M, outfielder, switch hitter, mammoth arm. Tell me about Braden Montgomery, another really interesting personality.
It's what they look like as far as, it goes that way. I'll give you a story about Braden Montgomery. So this is the pandemic year in 2020, okay, that we're playing. It's a main event. We're at Fenway. First game in a big league stadium with fans in 2020 was us. It was at Fenway Park. And we're staying at the hotel, and Braden's, he's same thing, hunting for a game, competing, trying to grind, wanting to learn, asking questions, extra work. Great kid. Yes, sir. No, sir. And it's not an act. It's who he is. Like, it's who he is. Dad's a great dude. Mom's outstanding, great family. And, at one point, I forget how this is. He was pitching and he was hit, and he was playing outfield. And he comes to my room, and I'm sitting there with a cross checker for a club. We're talking. He just wants to talk baseball, and I told him we'd talk later. So sitting there with the club, with the guy the guy's remain nameless, so he was a cross checker for a club, and he says, we started talking about Braden, and I said, well, let's get him in here. Let's call him up. Right. So I text his dad, because I always do that with the parents. I don't get, parents are involved. And I text his dad, and they come up to my room, man. We talked baseball for hours, just all of us, just talking about the game and what that was going to mean and what we were doing. And he asked so many questions on how to process it. All he wanted to understand was how he could leave that room better than when he walked in it. And every time I've been around the kid, and I mean, I've been around him a lot at this point, that's what he's been. He's trying to find a way to improve his game and who he is. And to me, the power ceiling on the game side, along with the makeup, because hitting for power at the big league level is not just about having the power. It's about understanding how to get to that power. There's a physical and mental process about how to get to that. Braden's he understands that. And he understands it with a way to be a pure hit guy. So I would have him, as much as I love Slade, who I'll see in a few weeks, and he might get mad at me. For me, Braden's got a shot to go 1. Okay. And because of all those things to go with it, he, with the upside of hitting 30 a year, he's got a chance to go 1. I've always thought he was a position player. I think that the stuff on the mound is there's one guy ever to do it. Braden can do it in college. I think he's going to close for them, maybe pitch on Sundays. But the one guy ever to do it just got $700 million. Just one. That's it. And I don't think I think for Braden to play right field every day in the big leagues, you're looking at 275, 280, and 30 with a lot of runs and not a lot of swing and miss, and just a clubhouse changing type guy. So the makeup for me and the person for me is again, it's I don't believe in the words off the charts because I want to see these charts before I say that. But he's top of the scale makeup and who he is. So all in.
Yeah, he's I've interviewed him twice now. I haven't met him yet, but he's on the Mount Rushmore in terms of like the most cerebral thinkers I've ever talked to. Like the guy, there's so much cliche in this industry. There's so much script. There's so much, this is what my agent tells me to say. You can tell he's one of the more thoughtful people that ever comes on camera or gets on the phone with you. So big fan of Braden Montgomery. All right. Last guy. We're going to talk about Duke lefty, Jonathan Santucci. I don't know whether or not you've spent a lot of time with him one-on-one. I know he's done quite a few Future Stars events when he was a prep. Where are you at with Santucci, and kind of what were your impressions of him when you got to talk with him?
So Jonathan Santucci, man, I've known since he was about 10. I've known since he was about 10 years old.
So you've talked to him.
Before I was even doing any of this. I was working for Seattle, and I was spending some time in the Northeast, and a good friend of mine at the time, who's still a good friend of mine now, Phil Price, was working at an academy. He was a coach, and Santucci went in there, and he was 10 years old, man. One of my first things we did was like write some feedback and some developmental reports, and man, it comes around that it's in the pandemic year. He's a senior. He lives in the area. Somebody goes down, not be able to get in the country from international, or maybe it was somebody, I can't remember who. Somebody was sick. I need an arm. And an agent says to me, and that was a weird year, as you know, the 2020, it was anything you thought you were doing, you weren't doing it. It was something, it was always going to change. And so 2020 comes in, and Steve's his dad, agent says, hey, have you seen this kid, Jonathan Santucci? And I'm like, man, this name rings a bell, but it's been a few years, what do I got? And he describes him, and I get on the phone with the dad, and the dad starts reminding me who the kid is. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's the kid? And so I hadn't seen him in a couple of years. Great kid, solid, great, very respectful, another great family kid, background, good makeup. I thought he was Mark Mulder. He got on the mound. He's from the bat. It was like this two-way guy. He gets on the mound, man. He's 91, 92. He's spinning it. He's got change up. In a draft that was 10 years ago, that kid selected in the comp round. You know what I mean? In this draft, he's going to college. Now, he went to Duke, and he's going to get a great education and come out way, change. But Jonathan Santucci is one of those left-handers that'll be in the big leagues in 18 months. he's going to rocket through the system with what he does. I know he's still two-way guy at Duke, right? Kind of like Brendan McKay.
I think he did a little bit. He had massive bat speed in high school, and I know he did a little bit of two-way as a freshman. I don't know if he bat too much last year.
Yeah, he's Mark Mulder for me, and he's a further rotation starter. I put him behind Braden, but not by much. He's in a good for me if I'm putting my list together, because the upside on Braden's bat is just so high. Santucci settles into be a 3-starter as his floor, and the makeup will allow he will attack you and cut you apart and do all the work that he needs to between starts. And there's no quitting him or his family. I'm all in on that kid.
You make the argument it's 4 very, very, very legit pitches from the left side with a ton of athleticism. I'm with you, man. I think he could be in the big leagues at the end of 2025. I really do. I think he could move that quick.
Yeah.
All right, we got one more. I totally forgot this guy, also a future stars guy, and actually the highest ranked guy currently on the board in terms of where he will go in the draft. Jackson Prep, right-handed pitcher / outfielder, Konnor Griffin. Some people think he's got the most tools in this class in terms of just like raw ability. I want to know, you've dealt with Konnor for a long time, several years. Tell me about the kid. Tell me about his personality.
Well, I'll say this. I would say this about the tools, because that's a very big statement anytime anybody puts on any player. It happens every year.
Fair.
I don't think anybody in the draft has better raw tools. Whether or not he's got the best, that's eye of the beholder. Better raw tools, I don't think anybody's got better raw tools. So as far as like the actual athletic ability, the things he does athletically are exceptional. They really are. He's got foot speed. He's got, jump through the roof. He's got some raw strength. I mean, he's got things that he does just of how he shows up every day physically that are impressive. If you like him as a hitter, you think he's Jeff Francoeur. If you like him as a hitter. If you like him as a pitcher, there's a number of right-handers you can compare him to that would have a long career. The thing about Konnor Griffin, from a baseball perspective, this is the only thing I'll say from a baseball perspective, is that one day you think he's a pitcher and the one day you think he's a hitter. So you don't know. With that athleticism, gives you first rounder. Just what it is. Because you're not going to find the athleticism later with a chance to do either one. And I'm not going to make it say what I think he is, as far that's not from that's other people can decide that. But that is what you're getting from a baseball standpoint. On the other side of things, on makeup wise, I think Konnor over time has had to deal with what I would call an unfair anointing. I've had a lot of time to reflect on this. I've thought about this quite a bit. And I had the kid, first time I met him at 14, I shook his hand in the dugout. And it was a very humble look in his eyes at the time. If you can imagine that. He didn't really want to look me in the eye, kind of his head down, shook my hand. I say, hey, man, good job. We'll see you again soon. That was really, man.
Konnor must have been 5'8", you're 5'11". I mean, he's looking straight up on you.
Well, he was in the dugout going down. But I mean, the impression of the kid at the time was he's going to have so much unfair expectations put on him that it's really just going to be how he's going to handle it, because he was already so much better athletically than everybody else. Now, in today's amateur climate, players like that are exploited. They were exploited a little bit before, in past eras. That's not necessarily new. But Konnor, in my mind, and I'm telling you, Joe, we've had some off-camera conversations about this player quite a bit. I've had some time to think about it. And while I'm very comfortable with my physical evaluation of the kid, I do think he's had some people anoint him in ways that didn't allow him to enjoy the process. Now, he may never tell you that because he's a really good kid and he's going to keep that inside, right? But I would have liked to have seen Konnor be able to do this without other groups putting him front and center on the poster part of it. And so I would have liked to see him just go enjoy it and earn it. And not that he didn't earn it, but not have somebody just tap him on the shoulder and say, hey, we're going to go ahead and make sure that the entire world thinks you're number one, because there's nowhere else to go besides one. The only place you can go is down.
Well, I mean, it goes back to that,
Well,
and this is nothing against the publication, the
Yep.
production, but
Yeah,
the
for sure.
the whistle page, the every guy that's been on that whistle page, it does them a disservice. Now, to Konnor's credit, Konnor is the only one that I can recall that has been on whistle to this point and has kept the humility and the game first and the talent first. You look at all the guys that have been on that. I remember when Blaze Jordan was on that as a ninth grader, and everyone said, this is the next Bryce Harper. He was, first base, Blaze Jordan turned into a fourth round pick in 2020. Konnor is probably going to go in the top 10, top 15 picks because he's kept the game first and he hasn't let the ego go. So I wish maybe it's one thing if you do that as a high school senior. I wish they would stop making those videos as ninth graders because it
you
is
nailed
damaging.
You nailed it. I'm going to say this for him. He's had to deal with an amazing amount of distractions away from just going to play baseball. Some that were close to him, some that weren't, as far as just general environments, right? That I think put him in a position that I don't envy. I really don't. And because of that, having been somebody who was a very highly ranked player out of high school myself, I understand where he did. I understand what he went through. He handled it really well. I will give him that. He handled it really well. I still looked at him in Seattle last summer in the eye, and I still saw the same 14-year-old. I really did. I saw the same kid who wanted to get out there and just play baseball and asking himself questions as to whether or not he was good enough. Not that he's a good enough athlete. Just wanting to go play baseball and trying to figure out himself, which is exactly where you should be at 17 and 18 years old. You should be trying to figure out yourself. You shouldn't be believing in what everybody else is telling you that you're anointed. And if I look back on this kid and I think about what's ahead of him, it's going to be exciting to see what he does without those distractions around him. It's going to be exciting to see what he does when he becomes himself, because the humility and all those things and the faith, those are all really good places to start. But this is probably one of those kids that we just talked of, the four we just talked about, that I don't think knows who he is just yet. I think he's going to figure himself out. I don't think he's going to be a bad kid. I don't think he's going to do anything wrong. I think he's fine. I think he's great that way. But I think he has to figure himself out. And unfortunately, guys like this in today's climate, when they go into wherever their next stop is, somebody's always going to try to take him down. It's one thing if you're at Jackson Prep. It's one thing if you're anointed in a bubble. But when you're anointed like that, and I'm going to use the term, again, exploited, the way that he was, his likeness was, his events that he was in. It's all great publicity, man. It's a lot of smoke, and it feels great. But everybody knows who you are now, and they have for a long time. Where if you look at Slade Caldwell, as an example, Slade Caldwell was somebody who wasn't on USA's radar again until he attended a certain event at the farm in Mississippi for one, young fledgling future star series. All of a sudden now Slade Caldwell's a guy, right? And so he's had the entire year to build himself back up, even though he was a guy the whole time. He was flying under the radar, had a chance to build himself back up, and now he's that guy that everybody loves. Everybody wants to be a part of Slade Caldwell. Braden Montgomery, completely unappreciated. Just was. I get why from some other people. I didn't think that way. And we know that because I've been very bullish on it. But so I get why some people weren't sure. I get it. Unappreciated. Everybody loves Braden Montgomery now, right? Jonathan Santucci, completely out of nowhere in the Northeast, overlooked entirely to a point, goes to Duke. Rest is history.
Best Konnor in the draft.
Konnor hasn't had that luxury. If Konnor does anything else but hit 40 in the show and hit 330, people are going to talk about him. If Konnor becomes a pitcher and isn't a two-starter, people are going to talk about him. And he's got to get away from the people that have decided that their ego was more important than his development. He's got to go out and play, because I really do think in my heart he's a good kid. Whoever's going to get him is going to get a credit to the organization as far as the person. I'm not sure that he's had an opportunity to be that person without somebody else blocking that first. And so with him, having had some time to reflect on some of those influences around him that weren't very fun for me to deal with. Which I'll say that till cows come home. Some of the influences around him were not very fun for me to deal with, and for anybody else to deal with. The kid's a good kid, and I'm excited for him to go figure himself out and step into what the next phase is for him, because he has a chance to do a lot of really fun things. A lot of really fun things.
Well, look at it like this: the junior showcase cycle is behind him. The bumps and bruises from last summer are behind him. The only thing he's got in front of him now, Jackson prep. And when he gets into pro ball, which I think you and I both agree, he's going to end up in pro ball. He's not going to end up at school. He gets to play 5-6 days a week and dedicate his life to the game. And I tell you what, man, like Connor Griffin, when Connor Griffin gets drafted, all of a sudden he goes from, instead of being the phenom that everyone's talked about for 4 years, he goes to, being one of the better prospects in just some organization, and he can just play the game. And I think that's something that a lot of guys unfairly just kind of deal with at too young of an age. So,
the thing that I'll say about this, and then I'll my last comment, is guys like that who are always supposed to be at the top of every list, when they go into the organization, wherever that is, the expectation is that you stay at the top of that list. And if you don't stay at the top of that list, then they say you didn't make it. That's unfair. It's unfair.
He doesn't even need to be at the top of a list, though. I mean,
I know
Connor Griffin
that. You know that. But that's the expectation, Joe. You know that. I know that. Other people around him in the organization know he's going to settle into who he is. But the expectation with people, with things like, and I'm not, this isn't a knock at Callis and Mayo at all, but, MLB Pipeline. It's not like they don't have him up there too, right? They have these guys in these spots. And if they're going to follow him and track him that way, he's not somebody new on the scene for them. They're not somebody, this guy's getting better. This guy's getting better. With Connor Griffin, because he's always been 1 or 2, it's, man, this guy he's getting worse. He's getting worse. Oh, he's 5 now? That's not fair.
I see what you're saying.
It's not fair for him to go do that.
Your peers catch up to you. Your peers weren't getting coverage when they were in 8th, 9th, 10th grade. And all of a sudden, when it becomes your draft eligible year, it's like you look around, it's like, oh man, there's 15 other guys here that provide similar ceiling and higher floor, and they're college safer bets. So yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. I think Connor Griffin is the guy who has all of the tools in the world, and when he's finally left alone to just play ball and just be another prospect in an organization, I think he's going to take off. I really do. I just got done interviewing him last week. Humble as all pie, and I'm excited to see what comes next for him. But Jeremy, we are going on 75 minutes. I want to give you the opportunity. Jason does this every week. It's not really my thing. I'm going to do something else. I'm going to do a different send-off. If you could characterize 30 Major League Baseball clubs into their personalities, who's the one club personified into a man that you would not let date your sister?
That's a hell of a question, Joe.
I mean, I don't know how you answer that, but that's my go-to. So what do you? Good luck.
The Seattle Mariners.
Okay, so what are the traits about the Seattle Mariners? Is it because you don't want them taking your sister to McDonald's for cheap dates?
Nah, well, that's I hadn't thought of that. That's good. That was good. I haven't thought of that one. I think it's more because they only want to win 54% of the time, and I want her with a winner.
Well, that's fair, but I mean, if 54% of the dates are good, that's a lot of good dates.
Sorry,
I'm not gonna let my wife see this.
Nope.
Oh man,
boy.
Jeremy Booth, always a pleasure, brother. We'll talk to you soon. Until next time.
So just chill till the next episode. Falling back on that ass, what a hellified gangster lane.